Another tournament that I think a lot of people have a hard time explaining into words. Fast forward to 2018, World Cricket League Division Two in Namibia. At the time, you were speechless. Of all the players who were running around and celebrating after the final moment against Canada, there were so many emotions going through. I remember you though. You had your hands over your mouth. You couldn't say anything. You were speechless by the end of the tournament. There's been a lot of things that happened in Nepal cricket, and I think a lot of people have seen a lot of wild finishes, a lot of wild events, but that whole 8 days just took it to another level. And things, if you thought you had seen it all before, well, that changed everything that week in terms of the scope of possibilities and finishes that happened in Namibia. Beginning with the first match, you start off with that epic one-wicket win with Basant and Sandeep at the crease against Namibia on the first day. You lose to Oman on day two. Then you come back with victories over the UAE and Kenya. Kenya, again, in very dramatic circumstances, going down to the final over. And then obviously the biggest of them all, the match against Canada on the final day. So take us through that week from beginning to end, starting with the Namibia match. What do you remember about how that first victory unfolded? And did you get the sense from there or the Kenya match or anything else leading up to the Canada match that made you think this is meant to be?
If I think of that whole week or getting into that tournament, I basically knew that if we could not make it, that would have been my last tournament as a cricketer or as a captain. I was so clear of the fact that because we had pushed so hard in terms of where we wanted to reach, and because we had this dream of getting ODI status, and we had already lost track a couple of times before that. So it was this one last dance, if I can call it, one last chance for us as cricketers. So went into the tournament on a personal level as well, thinking that if we don't make it, that would be it, at least for me. And I remember going to the first game, we had around 20, 30 odd runs. We had a couple of wickets left, and I thought sitting there, this match is done now. We're playing Namibia at home, and somehow it rained for a while, and the game got a bit disrupted. And again, came back, and Basant and Sandeep somehow got us over the line, won by one wicket. Game one done. And there's a photo of me running towards the cricket ground, and this is 2018, and it'd been almost 15, 16 years that I'd been part of so many cricket teams and so many cricket victories where I'm not somebody who'd run on a cricket field, never ever, even when we had won finals and even when we had qualified for a World Cup or played the World Cup or won. I'm somebody who would always, put my emotions under control. But that very tournament, from the very first game, you had me running onto the pitch saying, we've done it, so, and ran to the ground. We won that first game. Second game, we went to play Oman, and Oman, over the years, they've been a big thorn in our cricketing journey. Why? Because since 2013, we haven't been able to beat them at 50 over level cricket, and we don't play them as much, but they've been very dominant against us, even at Asian levels. And Oman beat us, so that meant one game, one loss. Then we went into the next game against UAE. It was on a very tricky wicket where the game got delayed because overnight there had been rain and the wicket was there'd been water had leaked in, so it meant the game started late. When we went in the game, we were not sure if the game would start. Then when the game eventually happened, it was a shortened game. They got 130 odd runs. Then at that time, we had to somehow push ourselves, and we went past them, got the score, and came down to Kenya again. Again, same thing. We had heroes in every game. Then we had this partnership between Rohit Paudel and Arif Sheikh, where they kept taking singles without hitting boundaries from 80 odd for 5-6 to just building the partnership. And when Sompal hit the winning runs again on the last over, we once again ran onto the field, and then came down to the ultimatum where against Canada on that particular day, we knew that whoever won would make it through. And Canada, I don't know if they won the toss, we won the toss. We put them in, and there's this guy who scored 100, and he hadn't even played the first two games, but he played the last couple of games, and I'm sure he was very determined to prove a point, and he scored 100, and we had to chase 190 or something, right? So was it, Pete?
195. 195 was the target. Srimanta Wijayaratne scored the century for Canada, 103 not out. And he negotiated Sandeep Lamichhane very well. And Sandeep was actually not fully fit. He had to come off the field. He hurt his knee at one point in the game. So his effectiveness was a little bit limited. There were some obstacles on the Nepal side from that standpoint. And it was fairly difficult batting conditions getting into the tail end of the tournament, used pitches. The other thing about that day, people who weren't there wouldn't appreciate, it was ridiculously hot. It was hot that day. And so for him to score a century, he was sweating bullets by the end of it. Very grueling innings. And then to come out and be where you were in the chase, and especially your own role in the chase, was very limited. Out first ball.
I remember. I remember, because if somebody asked me what would be the most important game of your career, I'd probably put this as my number one game of my cricket career, because after this was when, it was inevitable, because after we got victory on that day, before the qualifiers, I basically knew that we'd make it, irrespective of whatever it is, because if we had to win 3 matches out of 5 on the last over, on the last ball, and we came out on the other side of the game and came out victorious, meant that we would make it. So that day, I went and got out first ball, then wickets kept falling here, there. It was around 50 odd runs to win, 50, 40 odd runs to win. Last wicket was there. I was sitting in the dugout and just thinking to myself that I'm going to now go back and probably announce my resignation as the cricket captain of Nepal. And then there was no motivation. I basically said to myself before tournament, I told my wife that if we don't make it this time around, it would mean that I would not play cricket for Nepal anymore. Why? Because that would mean my last attempt at trying to become or play ODI cricket or help Nepal get ODI status. So when we won that game, and when you look at the videos of how we won, and I remember after the 9th wicket had fallen off, you had these 3 reserves from Canada. We were at the boundary line with the Canadian flag ready to enter the cricket ground. I was there in the dressing room with so many others. I'm sure everybody had their own thought processes going along their own minds. And then Karan started hitting, and then there's a 4 here, there's a 4 there, there's a 6 here, there's a single, there's an edge that goes through the slips, and there's a overthrow. So all this thing came down to, and when it came down to the last moment when there was a wide, and at that point, because we were looking at the scoreboard at one side and there was another scoreboard at the other end. So because one side of the scoreboard read inaccurate, when we thought that the wide was the winning score, and we ran, and then all of a sudden somebody said, no, the game's not over yet. Then we had to come back, and everybody was sitting in their own position. We came back and sat in the same position that we were in. And when Karan flicked the ball towards square leg, and when we won that game, I think everybody went to the ground. We had some of our cricketers who were crying, and I saw the Canadian players who were like, they felt as if the world had fallen. Personally, when I looked and thought of that whole moment, is like, you could not script it. Why? Because these were moments where you cannot write, or you cannot plan or prepare for all these moments. I was lucky and privileged enough to have witnessed something like that on a cricket field, and was able to digest it as well as be on the winning side of it. And I remember when everything had settled down, we went to the dressing room. I went into the Canadian dressing room, and everybody was inside. Some of them had tears in their eyes, and I basically had to tell sorry to them. I went in the dressing room and said, sorry, boys, it wasn't meant to be. Sorry, why? Because associate cricket's cruel. I knew what the stakes were at that point of time. If Canada lost, meant their pathway or their gateway to ODI status was lost. Losing ODI status for them would mean that they would not get the fundings, or the careers of the players and the coaches and the cricket system would no longer be any more relevant. So I went in the dressing room. I just said sorry and went into our dressing room. Then we shared a bit of emotion side of things where we believe that it was meant to be. And this meant to be story started long time back when we started the whole World Cricket League journey from Division 10 in Nepal with the throwing of the stones to the Bermuda miracle, to qualifying for the World Cup and winning against all the odds, and then coming into a tournament in Namibia where everything was done and dusted, but somehow Karan KC came up the ranks and played probably the most important innings that anyone can ever play for Nepal. I don't know if Nepal gets a test status in the future. I think that innings or that moment would something that would probably or might match the moment that happened on that particular day. And although it was Division 2 that we had qualified from that day, at least if not for everyone around me, I believe that now we are entering the World Cup through ODI status. That's what my dream was. And I felt that ODI status is now inevitable. We will go through and we will make sure that ODI status will be. We went into Zimbabwe, played great cricket, and there we are.